I have to be honest with you. When I picked up this stack of papers today, I was bracing myself.
Mm.
Usually reading about cancer is just, it's heady. It feels like you're reading about a lottery that nobody wants to win and you're just, you know, hoping your number doesn't come up.
It's the ultimate source of health anxiety, isn't it? We tend to view it as something that just happens to us, completely out of the blue.
Exactly. But then I saw this first statistic in the Malaysian burden of cancer study, and it actually stopped me cold. It didn't make me anxious. It made me feel, I don't know, empowered or maybe just surprised. 1 in 4.
22.2% to be exact.
Right. Roughly 1 in 4 cancer cases in this massive population study weren't just bad luck. They were attributable to 4 very specific things. Things we, actually have control over.
It is a statistic that really changes the texture of the conversation. Instead of just talking about incidents who get sick, we're looking at the why. And today's deep dive is really about peeling back the layers of that why. We're not just looking at the obvious stuff. We've got reports here on the economics of screening, the nuances of smoking trajectories that most people ignore, and a really counterintuitive report from the International Agency for Research on Cancer about when finding cancer might actually be a bad idea.
That last one, the overdiagnosis issue.
Yeah.
That's going to require some serious explaining later on because it sounds completely backwards.
It does.
But let's start with the groundwork. We're looking at a study titled Burden of Cancers Attributable to Modifiable Risk Factors. It calls out the big 4. I'm assuming we aren't talking about, obscure chemicals here.
No, these are the usual suspects, but the data reveals they operate in ways we might not expect. The big 4 are tobacco smoking, excess weight, specifically high body mass index alcohol intake, and physical inactivity.
Standard advice. Eat right, move more, don't smoke. But the breakdown in this data was what really caught my eye. It's not an equal opportunity burden, is it?
Not even close. And this is where the sociology meets the biology. When you look at the Malaysian data set, the burden of cancer attributable to these 4 factors is, well, it's heavily weighted toward men. For men, 39.1% of cancers were linked to these lifestyle choices.
That is nearly 40%. That's almost half the battle. If you're a man, 4 out of 10 potential cancer cases are tied to things you do every day.
But for women, it was only 10.5%.
That is a massive gap. I mean, we are talking about a 4 times difference. So if I'm interpreting this right, a man's lifestyle choices, at least these 4 specific ones, are carrying a much heavier load regarding his cancer risk than a woman's are.
In this specific demographic, yes. And the reason is quite singular: tobacco. In this population, smoking was attributable to 14.3% of all cancers combined. But smoking behavior here is extremely gendered. It's predominantly a male habit in the studied group.
Okay, so men are driving up the numbers by smoking. That tracks with what we generally see in older demographics especially. But this brings up a huge question for the women listening. If smoking isn't the primary driver for them in this data set, what is? Because 10% isn't 0.
This is the critical insight. And honestly, it's one of the most important takeaways from this entire stack.
Yeah.
For women, the primary modifiable risk factor wasn't smoking, it was excess weight.
Really?
The population attributable fraction, or PAF, for excess weight in women was 7.9%.
Hey, let me make sure I have that right. For women, being overweight was a significantly bigger cancer driver than smoking.
In this specific population, yes. Compare that 7.9% for weight against only 1.2% for smoking in women. It completely flips the public health script.
Wow.
We spend a massive amount of energy on anti-smoking campaigns, and rightly so. Smoking is catastrophic. But this data suggests that for women, the front line of cancer prevention is actually metabolic health and BMI.
That's a significant aha moment. It makes you realize that public health advice can't just be a blanket don't smoke. It has to be targeted. If you're a woman looking at this data, the gym and the kitchen are essentially your pharmacy.
Precisely. And speaking of targets, these risk factors aren't just, shotgunning the whole body, are they? They seem to have very specific targets.
Right.
The study found that if you could eliminate these risk factors, you're looking at preventing 65.1% of lung cancers.
2/3 of lung cancer cases, just gone.
And 63.6% of laryngeal cancers.
That's the throat.
Correct. And over 51% of esophageal cancers. These are cancers that are directly interacting with the agents we introduce to our bodies, smoke and food. It's a very mechanical relationship. You put the irritant in, and the cells eventually react.
I did notice one other thing in the data that seemed low, the alcohol impact. It was attributed to only 0.6% of cancers. I feel like if we looked at a study from, say, France or the UK, that number would be way higher, wouldn't it?
Oh, dramatically higher. And this is why we always have to contextualize our sources. This is a Malaysian study. The population is about 60% Muslim. So cultural and religious practices mean alcohol consumption is significantly lower across the board compared to Western nations.
So it's not that alcohol is safe, it's just that people in the study aren't drinking enough of it to register as a statistical villain.
Exactly. If you transplant those same biological mechanisms to a pub in London, the risk profile changes instantly. You can't just copy-paste health data across borders without looking at the culture.
That makes a lot of sense. But there is one risk factor that seems to cross every border, and we need to go deeper on it. Smoking. We usually treat it as a binary thing on a medical form. Do you smoke? Yes or no.
And that binary approach is exactly what the next study in our stack argues against. It's called smoking trajectory and cancer risk.
Trajectory implies movement. It implies a story, not just a snapshot.
Precisely. This was a cohort study that didn't just ask if people smoked, but tracked how they smoked over time. They identified 6 different patterns or trajectories.
6. I can imagine never and always. What's in the middle?
Well, life is messy. You have former smokers, new current smokers, people who pick it up later in life, and then you have the really interesting nuances, decreasing light smokers and steady moderate smokers.
Okay, I want to zoom in on the decreasing light smokers. I feel like I know a lot of people in this category. Maybe they used to smoke a pack a day in their 20s, but now they just have 1 or 2 at a party or with a glass of wine. They probably tell themselves, I basically quit. I'm safe.
That is the psychological trap, the I'm mostly good trap. But the data here is quite sobering. This study found that even the decreasing light smokers had a hazard ratio of 1.30 compared to never smokers.
So 30% higher risk, even though they cut back.
Yes. Because the damage is cumulative, there is just no safe floor for combustible tobacco. But if you want to see the other end of the spectrum, look at the steady heavy group, the people who smoke a lot and never stop.
Right.
Their mortality risk from cancer is 2.64 times higher than a non-smoker.
You're more than twice as likely to die of cancer.
And if you narrow that down to just lung cancer mortality, the risk is nearly 10 times higher.
10 times. That's at a percentage point difference. That is an order of magnitude. That's the difference between walking across a street and walking across a highway blindfolded.
It is. But I don't want to leave the listener with just the doom and gloom. The trajectory concept has a silver lining. The study reinforced that duration and intensity are the variables you can change.
Okay.
If you quit, or if you significantly reduce, especially in that critical 20 to 29 age demographic, you bend the curve.
You can change your trajectory.
Yeah.
It's not just about what you did 5 years ago. It's about the slope of the line right now.
Exactly. Biology is resilient, but you have to give it a chance to repair. The cells can heal, inflammation can go down, but you have to remove the irritant.
Okay, so we've covered the lifestyle inputs, the things we do to ourselves. We have the power to change our weight, our smoking habits. I want to shift to the monitoring side. How do we catch it if it happens? Specifically, let's talk about colorectal cancer, or CRC.
This is a heavy hitter globally, and in the Malaysian reports we have, it's the 2nd most common cancer in men and the 3rd in women. It's one of those cancers that really creeps up on you.
And looking at the incidence report, there's a really strong signal regarding ethnicity. The rates were highest among the Chinese ethnicity.
Yes, the incidence rate for Chinese ethnicity was 27.35 per 100,000.
Wow.
That's significantly higher than the Malay or Indian ethnicities in the same population.
Is that genetic? Or is that lifestyle again?
It's likely a complex interplay of both. You have genetic predisposition, but you also have cultural dietary habits, perhaps higher consumption of preserved meats, different cooking styles, or, metabolic differences. It reinforces that risk isn't a flat line for everyone. If you're in that demographic, your radar needs to be up a little earlier.
So if you are in a high-risk group, whether because of your genes, your diet, or just getting older, screening is non-negotiable. But let's be real. Nobody wakes up on a Tuesday excited for a colonoscopy.
No.
It's invasive, the prep is terrible, drinking that gallon of liquid, and it's expensive.
It is a high-barrier procedure, and that is why this economic evaluation report from MATES, the Malaysian Health Technology Assessment Section, is so valuable. They stepped back and asked a practical question. From a public health standpoint, does it make sense to just scope everyone?
The gold standard approach.
Right. Clinically, a colonoscopy is the gold standard. It finds the lesion, the doctor snips it out right there, and you have prevented a cancer. The study notes a 57 to 62% reduction in interval cancer risks. That is huge.
It sounds unbeatable. Why wouldn't we just do that for everyone? If it cuts cancer risk by 60%, sign me up.
Logistics and cost. It's expensive, and while safe, it's not risk-free. Perforations happen rarely, about 4 times in 10,000 procedures, but they happen.
Okay.
And imagine the strain on the healthcare system. If every single person over 50 needed a scope every few years, the queues would be years long. So the researchers crunched the numbers on an alternative strategy, the IFOBT.
The immunochemical fecal occult blood test. The stool test.
Exactly. It detects hidden blood in the stool, it's non-invasive, it's cheap, and you can do it at home.
But is it good enough? I feel like people view it as the budget option, like, oh, I can't afford the real test, so I'll do this instead.
That's the huge misconception. The analysis showed that a strategy of using the stool test first as a filter and only sending the positive cases for a colonoscopy was the most dominant strategy.
Dominant how?
In terms of cost effectiveness, the study found the incremental cost effectiveness ratio, or ICER, was around 9,377 ringgit per quality adjusted life year.
Okay, hold on. RM 9,377 per QLA. We need to translate that. What does that actually mean for the person listening?
Think of it like this. Governments and insurance companies have to decide how much money is worth it to buy 1 year of perfect health for a person. In health economics, anything below a certain ceiling is considered a good buy. In the Malaysian context, the threshold is often tied to GDP per capita. RM 9,377 is a very, very attractive number. It means this strategy is incredibly efficient at saving lives without bankrupting the system.
So the takeaway here isn't get the cheap test because the government is stingy. It's get the stool test because it is a smart, scientifically valid filter.
Precisely. It democratizes screening. If the test is negative, you saved yourself an invasive procedure. If it's positive, you get the colonoscopy knowing it's truly necessary. It's about using resources intelligently.
It's efficient medicine. Now, speaking of efficient medicine, we usually operate on this assumption that finding cancer is always good. The earlier, the better. Find it, kill it, live longer. That's the slogan.
That has been the intuition of the last 50 years. It seems obvious.
But you have a report here from the International Agency for Research on Cancer, the IRRC, regarding thyroid cancer, that says, maybe not. This actually blew my mind. It feels like we're entering the twilight zone.
This is where we have to challenge our deepest assumptions. We are facing what looks like a thyroid cancer epidemic in many high-income countries. The data points to places like France, the USA, and specifically the Republic of Korea.
An epidemic sounds terrifying. It sounds like something is in the water.
But here is the catch. The number of diagnosed cases has skyrocketed, literally exploded, but the mortality rate, the number of people actually dying from thyroid cancer, has stayed almost completely flat.
Wait, that doesn't make sense. If cases are exploding, shouldn't deaths be going up? Or if our treatments are amazing, shouldn't deaths be plummeting? It shouldn't just be flat.
If the cancer was a killer, yes. But what we are seeing here is a phenomenon called overdiagnosis. The report estimates that 50 to 90% of thyroid cancers in women in these countries are overdiagnoses.
Up to 90%. That is staggering. You're telling me 9 out of 10 women diagnosed in some of these cohorts might not have needed to know.
It's technology. We have gotten so good at imaging, high-resolution ultrasounds, CTs, MRIs, that we are finding tiny indolent tumors.
Indolent. That's a key word here.
It means lazy. These are tumors that are sitting there growing so slowly or not growing at all that if you never found them, the person would have lived a long, full life and died of old age, never knowing they had cancer.
So we are hunting for data, and we are finding it. We're finding a grain of sand in a haystack. But once you find it, you can't just ignore it, can you?
That is the tragedy of overdiagnosis. Once the word cancer is on the chart, the treatment train leaves the station. It's very hard for a doctor to say, let's just leave it there, and it's even harder for a patient to hear it. So these women undergo total thyroidectomies, removing the gland lymph node dissection, radiotherapy.
And that's not consequence-free. You don't just walk away from that.
No, you are on hormone replacement for the rest of your life because you no longer have a thyroid. You risk damage to the laryngeal nerves, which affects your voice. You have surgical risks. The IARC report is very critical of this. It says, we are causing overtreatment without proven survival benefits. We are hurting people in the name of saving them.
That is a hard pill to swallow. You think you're being responsible by getting every scan available, but you might actually be inviting harm.
It forces us to think critically. Systematically screening the thyroid in healthy people, people with no symptoms, might actually be a bad idea. If you find a small nodule, The expert insight now suggests careful monitoring, watchful waiting, rather than rushing to surgery.
It's the difference between hunting for a tiger, like colorectal cancer, and hunting for a house cat.
That is a perfect analogy. The tiger will eat you, you need to find it and cage it. The house cat is just sleeping on the sofa. And if you try to shoot the house cat with a bazooka, you're going to blow up your living room.
That puts it into perspective perfectly. The collateral damage matters.
It does. And this isn't just about thyroids, it's a broader lesson about medical technology. Just because we can see it doesn't mean it matters.
So let's try to synthesize all of this, because we've covered a lot of ground. We started with the big four. We learned that lifestyle is a huge lever, but we need to be specific. For men, the smoking data is just screaming for attention. For women, the data is whispering loudly about weight management.
Correct. Those are your primary defensive lines. If you want to lower your odds, those are the knobs you turn.
Then we looked at smoking trajectories and realized it's not just a switch you flip. The decreasing light smoker is still at risk, but the curve can be bent. It's never too late to change the slope.
And regarding colorectal cancer, we learned that screening is vital, but the method matters. The stool test isn't a compromise. It's a sophisticated tool for population health. It's the smart way to filter the population.
But then came the caution, the thyroid paradox. Just because technology allows us to see everything doesn't mean we should cut everything out. We have to be smart enough to handle the nuance of indolent disease.
It is about finding the balance between vigilance and anxiety. We want to be alert, but not paranoid.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave the listener with. If 50 to 90% of certain cancers found by modern tech are overdiagnoses, it really challenges how we emotionally react to that word.
It is a profound question.
We have been trained that the word cancer implies an immediate battle for survival. It's binary. You have it or you don't. But the research today suggests the future of health isn't just about finding cancer. It's about distinguishing the tigers from the house cats.
We need to shift our mindset from finding cancer to finding the cancer that matters. And that requires having very honest, sometimes difficult conversations with your doctors. Ask about risk. Ask about progression. Ask, is this treatment adding to my life or just subtracting from my quality of life?
It means we have to be active participants, not just passive patients.
Absolutely. Ask questions. Understand the statistics. Don't let the fear drive the car.
That is what the deep dive is all about. Armed with data, not just anxiety. Thanks for listening, and we will see you on the next one.